Hello everyone, this is EachPodPron TV with Make Poland Great Again. This is the 21st of February 2019. Today we have in our weekly program with our correspondent from the United States, Alex Newman, with us. Hi Alex.
Hey, how's it going, Ivan? Good to see you.
So let's just jump right in and have a chat about what's the recent things that have been going on both in Poland and all over the world. Perhaps maybe we can start with let's start with what we've just been talking right now about the recent statement from the foreign prime minister, temporary foreign prime minister of Israel, Israel Katz, who said that, and I understand that some folks in the US might have not heard about this because there's a lot of things going on with the wall, which we'll talk about in a minute. But temporary foreign prime minister of Israel, Israel Katz, basically quoted former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, who once said that the Polish people get anti-Semitism from their mother's breast milk. So Israel Katz, the newly temporary appointed foreign minister by Benjamin Netanyahu, quoted that and said that there is no doubt that the Polish people do. This is following a misquotation by Jerusalem Post of Benjamin Netanyahu, who referred to some Poles who collaborated during the Holocaust with the Nazis. This quote, I don't know if you heard about it, Alex, but it was misquoted by the Jerusalem Post and then picked up by some of the media and also our politician from Law and Justice Party, and exaggerated it and started additional conflict with the state of Israel. Said that the V4 conference that was supposed to take place in Israel just now is first they said that the foreign prime minister from Poland is going to go instead of the Polish prime minister. Then they canceled the whole thing altogether. Andrzej Duda started a war on Twitter. There were talks between Morawiecki and Benjamin Netanyahu, and they've been making excuses that it's all to do with the elections. They just want to save Benjamin Netanyahu additional conflict on the foreign front. So the whole thing was cancelled. The V4 conference was cancelled, which was supposed to take place in Israel. Tell me, Alex, and our viewers, what are your thoughts about hearing things like that? That the Polish people, this was a remark made towards the Polish people, not a certain group of Poles, but just like mentioned, the Polish people. Do you think that the Polish people are getting their anti-Semitism from their mother's breast milk? Is that a fair statement, especially following your visit over here?
Well, I think that's a very easy question. I mean, in my experience, I didn't actually find anti-Semitism in Poland, and there may be some. But, I think it's very unfair to make generalizations like that. It's just as ridiculous as saying the Jews something, to talk about a whole people as if they have some character flaw or some character defect. I think is very unfair. In my experience in Poland, people were very friendly toward Israel and toward the Jews. And I've written extensively on anti-Semitism. Actually, I did an in-depth three-part investigative series exploring anti-Semitism in Europe, in the United States, and around the world. And in my research, Poland really didn't come up very much. I found there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Islamic communities in Western Europe, in certain cities in Germany and France and Sweden, where Jews are now having problems to go out of their house and to walk around with their yarmulke, the skull cap on. And, that's real anti-Semitism. That's a problem, and we should talk about it. But I think it's very unfair to describe the entire Polish people as being anti-Semitic. I don't know anything about this Israeli politician, but I think that's very unfair, and I don't think anybody should do that about anybody. You don't generalize entire categories of people in such a derogatory, negative way. I think that's unfair, and it's sad also because, the Polish and Israeli governments should have good relations, like the American government should also have good relations with these countries. We have a lot more in common than we have that differentiates us, and it's a shame that some politicians want to throw these bombs into the middle of the discussion and mess things up. So I hope there'll be apologies and things can get back on the right track.
It's important that you mentioned not to generalize an entire nation. I don't remember if it was Babiš himself or some of his Czech foreign ministers who said that it's counterproductive to generalize a whole nation as being anti-Semitic or whatever. And also, it's ridiculous to accuse Poland of being this level of anti-Semitism in Poland, because we all know that Poles face death penalty while saving. They were the number one nation. They have the highest number of righteous among the nations in it. The next one, I believe it's Denmark. But in all the other Western nations of Western Europe that were during the World War II, they didn't have the death penalties and the amount of occupation and cruelty and punishment that the Polish people had. So over here there was really no say in which way the government is going. Also, Prime Minister Morawiecki has stated, I believe it was about a year ago, that the Polish people has collaborated, or he used the word perpetrators. I mean, even the idea of collaboration of a Polish occupied nation, of collaborating. If when you're occupied, you're not exactly being asked, do you want to or do you not want to collaborate, or anything like that. And to bring that up even one step further into perpetrators, that's ridiculous. Like, the Polish people had no say during the World War II and during the occupation whether they want to collaborate or not, whether they want those death camps on their territory or not. So I agree with you. It's entirely ridiculous statement. Also, we know that the head rabbi of Poland and another woman who deals with the Jewish communities in Poland have condemned the statement from Israel Katz. And just to mention to some of our U.S. viewers who might not be familiar with this temporary foreign prime minister of Israel, Israel Katz, he was the one responsible for the Chinese port in Haifa. He was pushing and lobbying for it heavily. He's a pro-Chinese lobbyist in Israel. So what further proof do you need for his intentions and what's behind his motives than his ties with China?
Yeah, it's very troubling. And I notice that a lot, that people get accused of being collaborators with Nazis when really, that's far from the truth. Oftentimes, I used to live in Switzerland, and oftentimes I would hear the Swiss being accused of being collaborators with the Nazis. And, some Swiss bankers might have helped Nazis hide some money, that's true, but to accuse the entire Swiss nation of being collaborators with the Nazis is ridiculous. When you look at their history, they were determined to fight to the death against a Nazi invasion. They were making preparations. They were prepared to lose hundreds of thousands of men to defend their country from the Nazis. And actually, they accepted many, many Jewish refugees into Switzerland. And so when I hear Switzerland demonized as, a Nazi collaborator, it makes me sick. And even some of our American heroes, our General Patton, for example, who steamrolled over the Nazis. Actually, the Nazis described him as their biggest, most dangerous enemy. A very patriotic, wonderful military strategist, our General Patton. And I think he was murdered. And after his death, he was accused absurdly of being a Nazi collaborator, when in fact, again, the Nazis knew he was their most dangerous foe. And the reason for this disgusting campaign was actually a Soviet smear campaign. Patton was very anti-communist, and he wanted to steamroll all the way right over the Soviets too and kick them back to Moscow and get them out of Germany and get them out of Poland and send them back to their borders. And so we got this nasty smear campaign that General Patton was somehow a Nazi collaborator. Same thing with the Swiss, and I guess you have these nasty smears against the Polish people, and it's just unfair. The National Socialists were the National Socialists, but to accuse everybody of collaborating with them because they were anti-communist or because you don't agree with their political views or you want to score cheap political points, I think is very disgusting, and it's the height of irresponsibility. It's very strange to hear this from this Israeli politician. So I'm glad that there's been condemnation by the top rabbi in Poland, and I hope this politician will apologize.
Yeah. While we are still on the topic, I want to mention our petition that we have recently started to President Donald Trump regarding reparation for World War II for Poland, from not only Germany, which never paid for their crimes, but also from Russia, who were also involved. We know about the Ribbentrop-Molotov pact, and also their further occupation of Poland. And as we know from the first ambassador of US to Poland, Bliss Lane, who mentioned extensively about the betrayal that Poland experienced after the World War II. So we started this petition. We now have about 3,000 signatures already. We need 100,000 to collect these signatures within a month. So we encourage everybody to share this petition, to sign it. It's very important, especially in light of the recent breakup of the V4 conference that was supposed to take place. We believe that the people who are behind it are the globalists, meaning Germany, Angela Merkel's current, you can call it even regime, not a government, Russia, China, and so we want to give Donald Trump the tools on the foreign field, on the geopolitical field, to actually fight back those globalists who are trying to weaken United States allies. That's why we appeal to the United States as the victor of World War II to assist us in this. And also, there's it's not just the reparations we're after. We also want to. Poland wants to become a strong ally of United States in Europe. We know that we are in a key position between Germany and the sort of the eastern flank with Russia, and the Chinese railway necessarily have to pass through this region. So you want to be like a strong foothold, just like Israel is a strong foothold in the Middle East. Poland, we believe, is supposed to be that same ally of the United States. This is the reason why we appeal to the United States to hit back on that front to tackle this issue. What do you think about this petition and about this initiative?
I think it's only fair that Poland be compensated for what it suffered during World War II. And of course, the Germans and the Russians, the Soviets, bear a huge amount of responsibility for that. And if they have not paid, they ought to be paying. Plus interest. It's completely unfair that what Poland suffered, that it was not compensated after the war. Think about how much that held back progress, taking apart the productive infrastructure of Poland, for example, much of which was shipped back into Russia, into the Soviet Union. I think it's unconscionable that Poland was not given fair reparations. And I hope that will happen, and Germany certainly can afford it right now. And, I would take it a step further. I would even say that the Russians who were involved in that should have been punished. I say this all the time. For me, it's unthinkable that after the ostensible collapse of the Soviet Union, not only were reparations not paid, but the perpetrators, the criminals, the mass murderers, the people who tortured people and ran death camps and ran these psychiatric institutions for political dissidents. It's unthinkable to me that these people are still walking around free today. Many of them in government positions or in high business or media. They should have been punished. We should have had Nuremberg trials, just like we had after the National Socialists were defeated, and the criminals should have been punished. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good thing you guys are pursuing, and I wish you the best of luck.
Full well that the German government does have the money, because we found out that the German government is still paying to some former SS officers not just the pension, but they're also paying additional, I guess you can say, bonus payments, monthly bonus payments. So they definitely have the money, and we know that US, unfortunately, and the Allies have basically assisted Germany, because Germany became what Poland should have become, and corner the Russian occupation, but instead the Eastern Bloc has been given to the hands of Stalin, and all the Western Europe was able to basically flourish under the freedom that they could enjoy. So it's it's an important thing. And also another important aspect of this petition as well is we recognize that part of the Poles that have been murdered and suffered at the hands of Stalin and Hitler, they were Jews. Many of them have been sent off to gulags in the east, and then came back from Iran back to Palestine and actually formed the beginnings of the IDF of Israel, thanks to Generals Anders. So we want to also at the same time recognize that some of the reparations belong to the Jewish people as well, and they haven't been compensated as Polish citizens. So what we propose in this petition, which is more visible in our statement of the November 11 movement, is that part of these reparations we intend to actually the just part and appropriate part is going to go to Israeli, to Jews who have also suffered as Polish citizens. And another idea we had as well is that we can perhaps in some governmental contracts or agreements between nations dedicate some of these funds that we're going to be able to get from the Polish and the Russian governments towards Polish buying arms, buying weapons, sophisticated weapons from, for example, from the Israeli companies and government. So that's sort of like what the Chinese say call a win-win, but it's a true win-win.
Yeah, right.
In that sense.
That's brilliant.
So, Alex, I want to ask you as well about the situation in the States with the state of emergency that Donald Trump has declared, and the efforts to build this wall. What can you tell us about the reaction from the Americans, in general, from the Democrats, and what's the state there with the wall at the moment?
Well, I think what's happening in America, I think, is not as encouraging as I would like. The Democrats in Congress passed a horrible bill that really restricts what President Trump is able to do. It restricts his ability to deport people. It mandates that he build all these facilities and infrastructure along the southern border that will facilitate more illegal immigration. It provides a tiny little bit of money for border security, but when you add in all these additional handicaps and handcuffs that are going to be placed on the administration, it's really counterproductive. And a lot of Trump's strongest supporters have actually argued that he's surrendered here, that this is just, complete betrayal of his supporters. People like Ann Coulter, who wrote a whole book called In Trump We Trust. I wouldn't have used that title because in America, in God we trust is really the slogan that defines us as a people. But even Ann Coulter has now said that Trump sold us out and that he's ruined his presidency. He lost his chance for 2020. I don't know if the situation is quite that dire, but it doesn't look good. There were much better ways, I think, for Trump to be able to do this. As far as the emergency declaration, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, this is already tied up in the courts. You have a number of states that want to continue the influx of illegal immigrants, states like California that are suing the Trump administration to stop this. And it's going to go through the Ninth Circuit, which is very, very liberal court here in the United States. And they're almost certainly going to rule that this is an illegal power grab and that Trump is not allowed to do it. So it may end up in the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court decides to take it. But even some of the supposed conservatives on the Supreme Court are now showing their true colors as liberals. So there's a good chance that the courts will be able to stop this whole thing. We'll end up with all these disasters in this bill that he signed, but again, with no wall. So it's hard to know what's happening. Actually, over the weekend, I was at a off-the-record meeting and had an opportunity to talk to some of Trump's senior officials. And, there's, I think, not as much optimism as I wish there was. I think there's a realization here that the other side has made a lot of progress. And unfortunately, we're hoping for better results. But, I can't say that we ought to be celebrating just now. I don't think that what's happened is a good development in terms of what Trump promised his supporters. And, he still has some time before the end of his first term to be able to make good on his promise. But I think he's made it much more difficult for himself by signing this legislation and by surrendering to so many of these demands that the Democratic Party is making. So we'll have to see what happens. But, as of right now, we have a record number of so-called families coming to the border, right? They figured out that, hey, if we just come to the border with a child, whether it's our child or not, maybe just kidnap a child, I don't know, then we can't be deported. We must be taken into the United States. We must be released because we can't be detained. And so what's happening, of course, is we're getting a massive flood of families and so-called families, groups of people who just picked up some children along the way, showing up at our border, and then there's nothing that the president can do about it. So this is not a good situation. It's exactly what the Democrats want. They think of these people as future voters, good tools to undermine the fabric of the United States. So it's not a good situation right now. And as much as I wish it were better, that's the reality on the ground right now as I see it, Ivan.
By the looks of it, and from what you're telling us, it seems that despite all the best intentions that Donald Trump and some of his closest, some of his closest people have, it seems that there's still quite a lot of bureaucracy in the politics. We know that the Department of State, what you mentioned in our previous program, that they're full of ill-willing people and people from former Obama and Clinton administrations, and it sort of seems to be that this is the case here as well. That we also have to line the ducks in a row, right? Because you can go on war if you don't have your troops ready, and it seems like Trump has the intentions, but there's a lack of resources, of human resources to take it up, and he's up quite against a big lump of people who are trying to sabotage what he's doing.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Yeah, we refer to this as the kind of deep state, where within the machinery of the federal government, millions of bureaucrats who want to stop everything he's doing. You have the entire media apparatus against him, the entire Democratic Party, and big parts of the Republican Party against him. And so it's a very tough battle. But, unfortunately, things don't seem to be getting better. Now, just a few days ago, the administration announced that they're going to be running this big global campaign to legalize sodomy and homosexuality all over the world. And, this is not what the American people elected Trump to do. He's getting, I think, very bad advice from some advisors. So we have this homosexual ambassador to Germany, who's made it his mission now to go promote the LGBT agenda around the world. And unfortunately, the State Department is continuing to do this as well. We've covered this in the New American. And, he's supposed to be making America great again. In his speeches, he said exactly the right things. At the UN General Assembly, he said, we're not going to tell other countries how to live and what to do and how to govern themselves. And we expect that you don't do the same for us, right? You let us govern ourselves. And unfortunately now this new campaign to go promote the legalization of homosexuality, I think is a betrayal of that. And, he has his daughter, Ivanka Trump, who was just in Germany dealing with Merkel, calling her some kind of wonderful woman and, working together on all these agendas. So I'm very concerned about what's happening. And I don't think that this has been Trump's intention, but I think the people around him, some of the people around him are taking advantage. I think he's getting some very bad advice. People saying, if you just go promote homosexuality, suddenly the left wing is going to love you and then you'll be able to do things. And of course, that's not true. They're going to continue to hate him no matter what he does, no matter what dog bones he throws them. So, I think a lot of his supporters in the United States right now are feeling demoralized, and I think that's exactly what the other side wants. They want his supporters to abandon him and to say, you know what, we're done with Trump. He's not doing what he said. And so they're succeeding on that front. They're peeling some of his supporters away. Not all, not all certainly, but again, even some of his strongest supporters. I mentioned Ann Coulter earlier, who probably was Trump's strongest supporter, almost to the point of being practically blasphemous. In Trump we trust. And now when you have these people who stood by Trump through everything, starting to fall away, I think it's a very bad sign. And I think the president needs to reverse course very quickly, because what he's going to find is he's going to start losing some of his allies. And he needs every ally he can find right now for the battle in 2020, for the next congressional election, and to do what he said and to do what he wants to do, which is make America great again and stop the forces of globalism from undermining the country.
Amen. And final topic for today, I have Venezuela and also Donald Trump's statement about in his speech when he gave about Venezuela, and he mentioned that he stated that the end of communism and socialism is near, not only in Venezuela but in the rest of the world. It sounds like great intentions and great words, but is it really that close to that, or is that just his wishful thinking, and on the ground we still have a lot of work to do?
Yeah, well, thank you, Ivan, and that's exactly what I was thinking. It's a nice sentiment. I wish communism and socialism were close to being defeated, but the reality is I don't think that's the case. There certainly has been a lot of progress. I think a few weeks ago we talked about the Sao Paulo Forum. It's the Foro de Sao Paulo, they call it in Portuguese. This was founded by the former Marxist president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Fidel Castro, the mass murdering dictator of Cuba, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. and of course the FARC in Colombia, the Marxist terrorist group that traffics cocaine to fund its terrorist operations. And they are on defense. That's true. In country after country, their forces have been defeated. In Chile, in Brazil, now in Venezuela, it looks like the Maduro regime is close to collapsing. In Nicaragua, they're still firmly in power. However, in Mexico, they're still firmly in power. And you have these people in power still all over the region. And even if they're not directly in power, they're the main opposition. So I think it's way too optimistic to say they're on the verge of being defeated. And when it comes to Venezuela, I think it's especially problematic to say that because we're talking about, yes, Maduro is a vicious, nasty communist dictator, but the guy who is on the verge of replacing him, Juan Guaido, is actually a socialist. I think we talked about this a week or two ago, Ivan. This guy is a member, his political party, Voluntad Popular, in Popular Will in English, is a member of the Socialist International, the biggest international socialist, communist, Marxist alliance of political parties in the world. This is an alliance that has said openly they want a world socialist government. A couple years ago, they held their Congress it was hosted by the African National Congress, which is a Marxist-Leninist political party. Almost all of the leaders of that party are also members of the Communist Party. And at that very moment, when they were hosting this Socialist International Conference, the world's top experts on genocide were saying that this party was involved in preparations and planning to exterminate a minority group of Christians and conservatives, the Afrikaner people. So it's very problematic to say that socialism is dying in Venezuela. We might say that one brand of socialism is maybe on the way out and a new, maybe milder form of socialism is coming in, but socialism is still socialism. And then we look at the United States, Ivan, and the situation is unfortunately even more dire. And I don't like to sound alarmist, but that's the reality on the ground. We now have dozens of socialists and communists in our Congress, right? These are people who couldn't get a security clearance to clean a toilet bowl on a military base, and yet they're running around now in our Congress, sitting on our most sensitive committees, getting access to very sensitive intelligence that, of course, they can share with their cronies in other parts of the world, fellow socialists and communists. This is an extreme danger. You also have the polls showing that most American young people now, right, from the age group of 18 to 29, most American young people prefer socialism to capitalism. The latest poll I saw was from Gallup. 51% of young people prefer socialism to 45% who prefer capitalism. So yes, it's true the older Americans know that socialism is a deadly and evil ideology from the pit of hell, but the younger people have been brainwashed into believing that this is okay, that this is a good idea. You have people like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, a communist congresswoman from New York, putting forth this Green New Deal, which is basically a recipe for communism and under the guise of environmentalism. It has 67 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, 11 co-sponsors in the U.S. Senate. And over the long term, if we don't transform what's happening to our young people, socialism is not only not dead in the United States, it is very, very much alive. It is a major threat. On the other side of the spectrum, most of the Democratic Party candidates who have announced for 2020 are either open socialists or have embraced socialist ideology. Bernie Sanders is, we call him Bolshevik Bernie. This is a guy who was over in the Soviet Union for his honeymoon, right? We have videos of him getting drunk with Soviet communists. It's unbelievable that this could be happening. But it is. And so I wish socialism were on the verge of being eliminated, but unfortunately, I think that's far from the reality. So, I was very pleased with Trump's comments in Miami. Actually, a friend of mine was involved in putting together that event. And, the people in Miami, a lot of them are anti-communist Cubans. We have something like a million Cuban Americans in Miami who despise communism with every fiber of their being. These are people whose farms were stolen. These are people whose fathers were shot in the head by Fidel Castro's goon squads. And so that's what they want to hear. But I think we need to be realistic and recognize that socialism is still on the march, and we need to be very, very active in opposing this, or it's going to swallow us whole.
And what better way to tackle socialism is than to attack one of their strongest footholds in Europe and Russia and Germany, making them pay for the World War II reparations. So we encourage our viewers again to go into the description below and into the petition and sign it and share it with as many people as you can. So that's it for today. Thank you very much, Alex, for being with us and for sharing your thoughts. It was very interesting, and we'll see you again next week. This is Ivan Belastenko for eSport Pro TV. Make Poland great again. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Ivan.